welcome to our free webinar with Swoop and Local Wisdom today. So we're going to be talking you through internal comms conversion, and we just want to give you a framework for measuring communications. Okay, so really informal, so please come off chat. I can see, you know, we're all talking. If you're brave enough, come off mute, talk to us. We want this to be a really interactive session. Okay, so I'm just going to move on through the slides and meet the speakers. So Coco, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. I'm Coco Molina from Swoop Analytics. I'm part of the customer success team with Gemma, and I cover North and Latin America.
Thanks, Coco. So I'm Gemma. So same as Coco, I cover North America. I was actually a Swoop customer, so my background is internal communications. So I worked in internal communications for 17 years. And prior to that, I managed an intranet. So I've been looking after intranets for over 20 years. So really old school. But yeah, really excited to be on this webinar today. And Pinaki?
Thank you. And so I'm Pinaki Kathiari. I'm CEO of Local Wisdom and co-founder of Resource Hero. I've been in digital communications for too many years. And over that time, I've worked with like global fortune companies, conglomerate agencies, and even startups. And essentially, I come with a mix of expertise and passions from computer science, design, psychology, and digital strategy. And my company, Local Wisdom, our mission in life is to empower communicators to stay above water and be strategic leaders. And we do that because great ideas are stressful if you don't have the proper means to execute on them. And so what we do is we take on the tactical nuts and bolts of execution so you could play a strategic leadership role in your organization. Some of the things that we do, our main services revolve around projects. This is typically us coming in to design, build, and launch a communication platform, whether it's an intranet, email, analytics tool, whatnot. We have subscriptions, which get you all access to incremental talent. So say you need like 5 hours a week of a designer and 3 hours a week of a developer, or something like that. You need talent, but not enough to warrant a full-time person. That's where subscriptions come in to help you manage the everyday. And our studio service actually sets up a mini communications or content production team inside of your organization, which turns into a shared service or a center of excellence. Last thing I'll say is what I love about my job is I get to take what we learn and share it with everyone. So thank you, Gemma, Coco, and the Swoop team for this event and what you all do for the internal comms community. I'm super excited to be presenting with you all.
Thank you. So we're just going to cover one slide, a little bit about Swoop. Coco, you?
Yep. Some of you may be wondering who Swoop is. And so Swoop helps organizations better their collaboration by doing analytics for people who are not analysts. And that would be myself. Swoop's expertise draws from years of researching how relationships impact collaboration and productivity. We're recognized as Microsoft partners, and we pride ourselves in helping some of the world's largest organizations improve their collaboration across different silos. We also published some of the world's largest and most comprehensive study of Viva Engage, Teams, M365, and soon SharePoint as well. And we also collaborate with some of the world's most prestigious universities like Stanford and Harvard in the United States and Griffith University out of Australia on the measurement of platforms.
Brilliant. Thank you. So why are we here today? So what we want to do is we really want to transform your communications with data that actually makes a difference for you. So we're hoping we're going to give you lots of top tips to take away to help you with your internal measurement, but we want you to stop thinking data and move that into insights. So we're going to give you some tips to better understand your audiences, a framework to measure communication like a marketeer, and give you help building more sustainable communication ecosystems. As I said, really informal. Come off mute if you're brave enough. If not, we will break for a Q&A section. But just we want you to get the most you can out of today. So go away to then start thinking of different ways of working when it comes to measurement and your internal communications. Over to you, Pinaki.
Right on. And so, when helping our customers with measurements and metrics, there's maybe 4 distinct challenges that we see internal comms face. And, as I'm kind of talking to them, if any of you face this, pop up a reaction or something like that. But typically, we don't have time is the first thing. We don't have the time or resources to really think about what we should measure. And then on the everyday management of like cobbling together reports and things like that is also a cumbersome task. Unclear goals. It's funny how many times we talk with our communicator clients and even their upper management isn't exactly clear on what outcomes they're looking for. So just even trying to understand what am I ultimately trying to achieve can be a challenge. Availability of metrics is another thing, right? Like many times we're limited by the tools we use and what kind of metrics can we actually get easily. And then where to start. A lot of times, just like we hear, I'm not clear where to start. There's so many data points that we're not sure what metrics we should measure, right? So exactly. So with that in mind, if you go to the next slide, we could talk about business goals, because one place to start, or one place I usually start, is with business goals. And it's a bit tricky for internal comms because, how do we understand what our business outcomes should be? And I'd always say, like, look at your strategic directives, like those annual goals that the company has, or just think about what's really hurting in your organization or what can strengthen the company. And this goes straightly into our communication strategy methodology. And we have this like slide with Mahatma Gandhi, and it's one of the places where I like to hang my hat, right? It goes like this, right? Like he has this quote that says, your beliefs turn into your thoughts, which turn into your words, which turn into your actions, which turn into habits, that turn into values, and ultimately leads your destiny. Right. So the point is, and if you go to our next slide, the point is that experience changes our beliefs and actions. Right. So experience leads to belief, leads to actions, which leads to outcome. Right. And so with that in mind, we think about communication strategy as working backwards from the outcome. Right. So based on the outcome we're looking for, what's the action that leads to the outcome? What's the belief that leads to that action? And what's the experience that leads to that belief? And as internal communicators, what we're trying to do is insert a channel in there in order for us to influence that experience, in order to influence that belief, action, and outcome, right? So, knowing that starting point, knowing that end outcome is a great starting point for you to work backwards to figure out what's the experience. But that end outcome is what we ultimately want to measure, right? Because we're not communicating just to communicate, we're communicating to create some type of change in the organization, right? So be clear on the objectives you're looking to create. We want outcomes like this. So if you go to the next slide, Gemma, we want to see things like, we want to have all of our employees enroll in the new benefits plan by the end of November, right? Or we want to affect 50% reduction on the time it takes the staff to perform X, Y, and Z, or we want to reduce accidents and increase safety. There should be something that we're tying everything to, right? Because as a UX practitioner, right, I think about what we're trying to get our users to do, but also as a UX practitioner, one of the first things we're looking at is who is our audience, and that is super important. So Gemma is going to talk a little bit about that.
Thank you. And I see Sarah's popped in a question. So how do you handle the problem that so many people want to be communicated with through different means in different frequencies? So hopefully these slides will help you think a bit differently. But as Pinaki said, it's about that outcome and what you want to achieve. So I'm just going to cover a few slides now, and some of these might help Sarah and give you some ideas to take away. So just bear with. So data. The data can be really helpful to understanding your audiences. So I'm just sharing some screenshots here from Swoop Analytics. So as Coco said, we cover collaboration analytics. So we look at tools like Swoop for Microsoft 365, Swoop for Viva Engage, Swoop for Workplace by Meta, Swoop for SharePoint Online, so intranets, and Swoop for Teams. So these two screenshots here are looking at Swoop for Microsoft 365 and Swoop for Viva Engage. So comparing the way your different audiences spend their time collaborating will give you valuable insight that helps you design better communication campaigns and target the channels your colleagues use. So obviously you need that data to really understand where they go to work and how they use your channels. And so it's really important to sort of reach their hearts and minds. So what do they think? What do they feel? What do you want them to say? What you want them to do? Just to really help influence your outcomes. So as Pinaki said, it's really important to understand what you want to achieve from those outcomes and then work your way back with your measurement, but use the data that you have available to you to really determine those outcomes. So the next slide, so back onto the outcomes. So what we've done here is you can actually put yourselves in the shoes to help influence the outcomes. So some things I've done before when building comms plans and the measurements is just to really know your audiences. So persona map, I'm going to talk about empathy mapping in the next slide, but just understand how they work. So for example, this person, the knowledge worker, works in finance and spends a day working remotely or in the office. So these ones spends time on manufacturing floor. So these are your frontline workers, probably more harder to reach audience. And then again, the works part-time in a retail store. So again, that hard to reach audience, priorities are different. So if you can put yourselves in their shoes, just to really understand and just help with the way that you plan your internal communication campaigns. So I'm just going to talk you through something, empathy mapping. Now, I don't know if anyone here has ever used empathy mapping. You may use personas. Empathy mapping is probably used quite a lot in the user experience, in the UX space, but it's just really to help you understand your colleagues and personalise the messaging. And I think empathy mapping is a great way to do this, okay? It also helps remove any assumptions that you might unconsciously have. And I think that is the first thing that you need to do. I think unconsciously that you don't know that you do it, but you tend to sort of relate to your own experiences. So I think going back to that outcome, so think of your frontline workers, so how do they work, just to eliminate those assumptions, okay? And empathy mapping is also a great way to understand user characteristics and the needs of your audience, of your internal audience, okay? So what we've done here, so again, this is using Swoop, and so the Swoop platforms of the of just understanding what colleagues here see, think, feel, say and do, okay? So you can actually use this as a template. There's lots of templates online as well. So what do they think? What do they see? What do they say? What do they do? What do they hear? Okay, you can absolutely list this, and so you will probably have, if you're using online tools, online platforms, you will be able to hopefully extract that information, that data, to create these insights to really help you. So things like viewing pages on your intranet, email. So if you use like an email tool like Popular or something like that, that has inbuilt analytics. So take that measurement, get that data, and then just try and apply it to something like an empathy map. And I just think it's just a different way of working, but it just really gets you understanding your colleagues and your audience, and hopefully can help personalize the messaging. So Sarah, to your point, I think it's really hard. I think when somebody wants an all-employee email to go out, you know, people interact differently. So I think if you can use personas, empathy mapping to just really work out what you want to achieve from each audience. So go back to those outcomes, but how are you going to reach those outcomes by reaching the different audiences? And this is where this empathy mapping will help, but you obviously need the data to really create those insights to help you get to this point. So Anoop Benaki now is going to talk you through the IC conversion framework, which is super interesting.
Right on. Yeah, thank you. And yeah, thank you for that point you just made, like empathy mapping, journey mapping, personas, use cases. Those are all UX terms that help us to define an experience by first understanding who's going through that experience. All right. So and I think as internal communicators, I think we should, and I do it a lot, is borrow from other areas or other functions, right? Like what Gemma just said about user experience. Our IC conversion framework borrows from marketing and sales, right? And if you go to the next slide, Gemma, it's like a conversion funnel. Essentially, people come in, they take some kind of action that moves them down the funnel, and ultimately they get to that business outcome, right? That business outcome in user experience speak or in sales speak is like, oh, I checked out my cart and bought what I needed to buy online, or I went ahead and paid and signed up for that conference. That could be a business outcome at the end of the day. And then throughout the funnel, you're going to have people that drop off, and that's why that funnel kind of shrinks and tapers down. But a few things that are important is one, understanding that empathy mapping, like Gemma just said, because we said earlier that people have experiences that leads to beliefs and actions. Well, you want to know their current beliefs in order for you to come up with an experience that's going to change that belief, to change that action, right? So in the next slide, you go, essentially, our IC framework breaks it down into these 4 stages. What's a little tricky about internal comms is the outcomes is not as clear cut as in sales or marketing, like I bought this, etc. Right? So we think about, instead of measuring everything for everything, we just want to measure 4 attributes of each communication that's part of your campaign. So I'm going to go through each one of these. So if you hit the next slide, Gemma. So we have C, right? And C is just basically impressions. Did people see the message, right? And we measure C. This is probably what you've been doing all this time. We measure C by looking at, number of page visits if it's a website or an intranet, number of email opens if it's an email, number of post impressions if it's social media, number of attendees if it's a training, and number of page visits if there's like a registration sign up page, right? So that's very simple. The next one is understand. Did people take the time to understand the content or absorb that message, right? And we use a basic formula that tells us if people spent enough time to understand it. So for this metric, we find, how long does it take someone to read this article or watch this video or attend this full training? And we match that, we divide that by the number of people who are there. So if it's an article, we take the average time spent on that page and divide it by the average time it takes to read that article, right? So if it's like, article A has like 300, if article A, takes like 10 minutes to read, but the average person only spent like a minute or 30 seconds on that, then people are not taking that time to understand it, right? And that's the idea behind this, is that when you see one of these stages in the conversion isn't working the way you want, that's when we could pinpoint in to see like what's going on. Why aren't people reading this content? Should we change this content? Should we put it somewhere else, etc. Right? So it's a way for you to see where the issue in the conversion is and pinpoint that. So the next one is engage. And engage is, it could be optional based on your communications, but this is measuring, did they interact and engage with the content, right? And we have a formula, and I apologize for the math here. It's not too much, but we have a formula that you could use to kind of measure all of the different engagements in your thing. And it basically looks like this. You add up all the different things that you call an engagement. And that could be a like, a comment, a share, a bookmark, or whatever you define as an engagement. And you divide that by the number of page visits or the number of unique page visits. You multiply that by 100 and it'll give you a percentage, right? And it's interesting to be able to see this because one article might have 300 total engagements and 1,000 page views, and another article might have like 30 engagements and 100 page views, but both have the same engagement score of 30, right? So it lets you know that the content is equally engaging. So that's where we want to kind of think about the engagement as a way to track everything in the same way. And the last one is act. Did people perform the intended action to move to the next step, right? And these metrics are really custom to the specific call to action that you have, right? Like, did they sign up for that course that you wanted them to sign up? Did they download that app for, adoption, right? Did they find the resource they're looking for? So it's really custom. And sometimes you need to get custom analytics for this to track. And that's why I'm here with Swoop, because we want to kind of like gather metrics possibly from another department. We could do things too, like event tagging if you're using like another analytics tool as well. There's also link shorteners like Bitly and things like that. And then you could also, using analytics tools, measure inbound clicks, right? So if we're trying to get everyone to this one registration page, we could look at that page and see where is everyone coming from, right? So that's our high level framework. And I know there was kind of a lot and there was a little bit of math involved in there. So I think I'm just gonna like pause for a second and just see if there's any questions or if there's anything confusing. There's still a few other tidbits that we have to share, but I'm just gonna pause to see if there's any questions and we catch up on the chat.
Yeah, Sarah, do you want to come on and just ask your question?
I posted a question there. I'm not shy, so I easily come
Excellent.
off video and microphone. So we use Viva Engage, and then we use the underlying SharePoint site for document management, and we have a ton of content that's on the SharePoint site. I love your framework of kind of the funnel, but how can we possibly measure the understand metric with downloaded content?
Oh, downloaded content. Oh, that's a really good question. I don't know if I have an answer for you at this very moment on the understood question, but the intent of the understand question is to one say that, like, did you just spend enough time to understand it? So other ways that I think we've measured understand is through like a post survey or something like that, right? So, hey, we wanted to get feedback on all of these downloadable resources that we have. Is it understandable? Do you feel like you have enough time to read through it? So that's another, I guess, the lowest common denominator way, if we can't actually get to the metrics of how much time they spent on that document. Does that make sense? And I'll ask.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. We have communities of practice where it's intrinsically tied in with our business, and theoretically, the content that they're downloading should funnel through to action, and because they got valuable technical resources, they should be able to deliver an engineering architectural project to our clients more efficiently with better quality and all of that. So. I'm just thinking through. I've been doing a lot of thinking on metrics lately.
Yeah. And you know what? Sorry, Gemma, I'll let you go.
I was just going to say, do they need to be downloadable documents?
They don't need to be, but I think in many cases, given the behavior that we see from our people, that's how they would consume it.
Yeah. Because I was in so some places that I've been before is actually and it's probably, I don't know, it did cause a lot of issues, but I tried to move people on from that. They just were so reliant on PDFs, so PDFs. And so I said, if you can make it from a PDF into a web page, make it into a web page, because also I was just saying, like, PDFs sort of encourage people to print it off or then download it and print it off, but actually if you can make it into a optimized web page, it's accessibility, you can track it a lot easier, doesn't encourage people to print it off. And I think the thing is with downloadable documents, people download, print them off, often refer back to them, and if you've made an update to that document,
Right.
they won't go back to the latest version. They'll go, well, this was saved on my hard drive, or I downloaded this in my download folder, and I'm just going to reference this as a document. I mean, what you could do if you do want to use the downloads as a metric is your call to action is download this document, and then see how many people are actually downloading it, because you can do that in SharePoint, can't you? You can look at the file, we can go into the files, it's manual. I am going to show you Swoop for SharePoint though. I've got some slides on Swoop for SharePoint, and so I know you've seen it, but yeah, you can then like maybe use Swoop for SharePoint to look at the files that are being downloaded. It's a tough one. It is a tough one, because I know people, when it comes to intranets and document storage, it's documents, and we do know, I can see someone's got their hand up, and we're doing the SharePoint benchmarking report at the moment, and we've got some early data that we're pulling from it at the moment. And we do know, and it might be the case for you as well, that the majority of people are still using desktops to look at intranets, not mobile. So before I would push mobile, actually we can see a very, very small amount, like minimal, but like less than 2% are using intranets on mobile. So actually my argument to say people are using the internet on mobile and you don't want a document because of the pinching and zooming, we know that people aren't really consuming intranets on mobiles at the moment, and I don't know why, but the documents, I think, are always, there is going to be, or people are always going to want them on the internet, but
Yeah, and some industries are behind others. I'll shut
Yeah.
up, but I think I'm not alone probably on this call, where we still have the bulk of our people want to receive everything by email, and that's so not the best way. But that culture change is a slow and steady progress.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've got some more questions,
We
Pinaki.
do.
Shall I read them out?
Yeah, we could talk to them. I'll just say one last point really quick. If you go back to a previous slide, I just want to say, so these kind of 4 pillars right here, right? I think the 2 most important at the end of the day are the 2 bookends. Did they see it? Did they take action on it, right? To understand and engage, I think are nice to have if you have it, so you could kind of see a little bit more what's going on between those 2 things. But ultimately, like we say, like the easier version of this is that they see it, that they act on it, and then did we get the results at the end of the day? So, did they see that there's a link to that PDF? Did they act on the requirements that were in the PDF? And then did we ultimately get to where we wanted to go? And we could get into some of the other questions. And I think, Sarah, I'll come back to your other question earlier on as well, but let's go and chat with some of these other questions.
Okay, so
Could I pop in just because my question, this is Jim Protos from UNICEF. My question really relates to that last comment. I'm not so familiar with the terminology conversion, not being in sales and marketing. So is the conversion actually going from seeing to action, or from action to outcome, or all of those? If you could just elaborate a little bit on that. Thank you. Over.
You're welcome. Yeah, thank you for the question, and thank you for posing that, especially as I'm drawing out things from like other functions. If you think about all the steps that it takes for you to like essentially purchase something, even if you wanted to go to the movies, for example, right? We have to like figure out what movie to see, what theater to see, where to go, who to go with, and then ultimately the conversion for the movie theater is that you purchase the tickets. And then they might have another conversion after that. Did you go to the concession stand? And then they might have another conversion after that, which is, did you buy their rewards program or sign up for their rewards program stub thing, right? So if you think about conversions are basically multiple ways to say that I converted this person to the state that I wanted them to be in. Does that make sense?
Yes, sorry,
Oh.
I was getting off mute. Yeah,
No worries.
thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
Got it.
So any campaign, you might have multiple conversions, and over the course of all of like KPIs and things like that, there could be like multiple touch points to get you there. Cool. Thank you, Jim. There's another question I saw. How do you measure sentiment data, like reactions in team meetings and whatnot? Swoop, have you figured out a solution for that?
Yes, we have. Yes, and I've got some screenshots. But so Swoop Analytics, we do measure Microsoft Teams. So, but we do have a pure sentiment analysis in Viva Engage. So it's Swoop for Viva Engage, but we do look at how people are interacting within Teams. We do say though we are Swoop and not Snoop, so it's not about finding out how what the conversations and what's happening. It's about how people are collaborating and working. And Jeanette, what we can do is we can share with you. We did a Teams Teams and Microsoft 365 benchmarking report, where there's lots of data in that about how people are working out loud collaboratively. I'm not sure if that answers your question, because I think you probably Jeanette, do you mind coming? Hello. Is it more about what's happening in those teams? Is that what it is, or is it more about how they're collaborating, working?
I'm sorry, I didn't clarify better. So I host a lot of events via Teams, and a lot of people are shy, they don't want to speak up, and that's fair. I'm sorry, I wasn't on the call, I was eating lunch, to be honest. But we get a lot of reactions. We get a lot of people, thumbs up, hearts, etc. And we want to be able to measure that, because we want, this battle of data that we need that's can't be quantified. Yeah. So, I mean, and I know there's no way, I mean, we looked into it anyway, we couldn't find a way to measure reactions, like how many people hearted. We're not looking for names, we're just looking for, the number of times people like A or B.
So we, in Swoop for Viva Engage, we don't say if they hearted, if they liked, but we do look at reactions. So we can pick up reactions in Viva Engage. So let's ask our product developer, because it's not something we do in Teams at the moment, is it, Coco?
No. And I'm just thinking that there are maybe other providers like Hive that may have something like that could measure, because I know that they are in that space.
Yeah.
But as far as we know right now, Swoop does not have that.
So they're called Hive Analytics, and they look at video. Go on.
There is a it is doable. It is just not easy, as I was like just looking it up on like the Microsoft support, because Teams reactions are captured in audit logs. However,
I saw that, but it's so cumbersome to go through them.
You'll need like a developer to go in there and through PowerShell scripting to go in there. But if you'd like to like chat about that and see what that would take or anything like that, I would love to connect and explore that, because it's something that I know a lot of people would be interested in as well.
I mean, I just saw this particular slide, and I thought, oh, maybe they would know.
Yeah, there is a way. It's just,
there is.
Not as super easy to get, really.
Okay.
It's getting that data, isn't it? Out. But if it's available, if the data's available, which it sounds like it is, then it's absolutely something we can ask our product development team to. But definitely.
Yeah.
So there was another question. Show how. So which analytics tools would you suggest to effectively measure all of these KPIs? Well, obviously we're going to pick Swoop Analytics, and again we can show you. We'll walk you through. At the moment we look at products. So Swoop look at products, but I know that our end goal, so the end state we want to be is we're just look at it at the moment, but actually just have Swoop Analytics to plug in to all of your different platforms, and then just give you that overarching holistic view of how everybody's using, to get all these sort of metrics into a single dashboard. So that's stuff we're actively working on. But I have got some screenshots of Swoop, and just to exactly on this, to see, understand, engage and act. And then I've got some screenshots on how Swoop can help, so we can go through those. Is there any other questions before we move on?
There's
I'll
a reaction.
There's a reaction.
We've measured one.
There's nothing about. I'll say a few things to the previous question. We use a few tools to collect data and visualize data. So there's Google Data Studio, there's Microsoft Power BI, there's Tableau, and so those, because it's not always going to be the case where you're going to be able to get all of this data from one tool. So we're looking at aggregate tools. And then the other thing we look at is automation tools, because, you know, I'm trying to avoid as much as possible copying and pasting data from one place to another. So we've used Microsoft Power Automate. We've used things like Zapier and Workato, for instance, to be able to grab data from one place and plug it into another place to collect it all. So even if we were doing what we were just talked about for measuring reactions in a meeting, if we could create a script to gather that information, feed it to Power BI, and then couple that with like the meeting and things like that, then we could actually visualize a set of meetings and the number of reactions in there and things like that. So these tools will help bring in data points from multiple places and help you visualize them.
Yeah, we
I'll add
tried
it to the
that.
chat.
I worked with our automation team, and
Uh-huh.
I'm telling you, I've been working to the ends of the earth for a solution. But so right now I'm actually working on several different automations with them, and one that I'm using the Viva Engage backend analytics. I'm trying to get automated numbers from them, and the bot is off. So just working out the kinks in the bot is, yeah. So, and I mean, the Viva Engage metrics are relatively easy to pull, but you know, when you're pulling from multiple communities month over month, you know, it's a lot. So yeah, that was something we tried, and we're still working on.
Yeah. It's Microsoft is like finicky with this, because it's particularly with Microsoft, because it's so big and like and massive. Like they have a lot going on, and I've been really excited about like the Swoop for SharePoint and things like that, because there isn't a really good solution, and Microsoft doesn't have one at this very moment. But thank you. I'm definitely going to connect with you so we can share notes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So I'm going to move on quickly. So Pinaki, I think you've got one final slide that you can just. It was just.
Yep, this is just the quick raw, like a data dump version of this conversion, right? So this is just an example of how you could like share the information. And this is not the cleanest, most beautiful view, but I wanted to show this one because in this campaign, we have these 3 communications going out: training, invite, email, registration webpage, and then the live training session. And so we're just kind of measuring like what, if people saw it, understood it, engaged, acted, and then converted. So each one of these lanes has a conversion that then moves them to the next lane. If that makes sense. But the reason I wanted to show this is that for this one campaign, trying not to have like loads and loads of data, but just the right data for me to be able to like sink in, like, oh, registration webpage had 3% social engagement. Why is that? Should we do something about, you know, things like that is what we want to pinpoint here. Yeah, and that's in a high level what this is. And once you have the data, it could be put into different charts and things like that. But
Thank you. So now this is where we're going to show some examples of how Swoop can bring the IC conversion framework to life. So just got some screenshots here. of the C example, for example. So this one here is looking at the most engaging post from Viva Engage, for example, but we also have it for Meta by Workplace by Meta, sorry, so we can analyze that. So Jeanette, I think like you said, out of the box analytics, they are there, but you either have to work with IT to try and really pull them. So we do all that work, and I think Coco said at the very beginning that we build analytics for people who aren't analysts. So you can see here, so how many people have seen it, how many unique people have been there, the number of shares, the reactions. So this is where we do look at reactions in tools like Viva Engage, and the number of replies. These are the key statistics, for example, from SharePoint. So SharePoint Online, so how people using your intranet, how they're using your web pages. And then going back to like the empathy mapping and understanding your different audiences, you can use your sort of Active Directory to put on like departments, locations, things like that, to really drill down and understand how your audiences are showing up and how they are using your internal communication channels. So this is an example of C, okay? Next one, I've just lump these all into understand, engage and act, because it's things like sharing, it's things like downloading, these adding a call to action. So what are we asking colleagues to do? So here, I think Pinaki said at the beginning, it's about that, like how long are people spending on a page, so your typical visit time. So if your page is 2 minutes and people are spending 2.5 minutes, brilliant. If people are spending 10 minutes on that page and it's only like a 5-minute read, then something's going wrong. How healthy? So what we do is we look at how healthy is your sort of how healthy are your web pages. So it looks at the quality, so like spelling mistakes, broken links, the last time pages was updated, the experience. So again, it's that whole readability. Are you giving enough headings? Do people know what they're going to get from the content that you're giving them? And the engagement. So is it that interactive time? So how long are they spending on it? This is again from Viva Engage, this is from SharePoint, this is from SharePoint. So these are just some examples of how Swoop can help. And then just going to go on to this slide. So another way of making sense of it all is the what, so what, and now what. And actually my colleague Pete, so Pete covers the Europe, he uses this all the time, and I just really like it because it's a simple model, but it just helps. So the identifying the what, so what we saw, so that's where we take the outcomes, what we saw, the understanding, so the so what does it all mean, and then the planning with the now what. So how are we adapting our results, and what to expect when next time you maybe put out similar communications or you're working on an internal campaign. So I just I think we're coming to the end of the deck, but just a couple of things I just wanted to share, and we've got some tips and insights next for you. But I just want to say, I think it's really easy when you have analytics and data and insights to really, I think, look what happened in the past. How many people looked at this page, this is what happened, this is what happened. But I think using all the data that you have is so important for the now what, so the future. Just use that insight to really understand and how you sort of preempt how you think your communications are going to land, okay? And definitely the simpler that you make it, the more compelling it can be, okay? So the what, the so what, now what. So it's another way just to overlay when you're planning where you are, your outcomes, and just to continue improving and moving forward, okay? Something else I just wanted to share as well, and I think when you're talking about measurement and internal campaigns, because there is so much data and you've got this information at your fingertips, I would recommend going in and just constantly reviewing it. So rather than wait to the end of an internal communications campaign, actually use that data to your advantage and tweak as you go along. So if you see that something's not working like the outcome that you actually thought, then go in and have a look. Well, you can find that out. So don't just wait till the end to measure. Just, I think, watch and learn as you go along. And I think that's something that I used to do quite a lot. So as you know, I was a Swoop customer. I use Swoop, I would be in Swoop every single day, just watching how my channels were being used, what was working, what wasn't working, if anything needed some sort of like some help, just to push it out there, look at my social influencers, try the different channels. So, and I think that's it. And I think today it's about being bold, and I think it's really easy to communicate today, but I think it's really hard for people to just read it all and take it all in. So definitely use that, like as we said at the beginning, taking that data and making it into insights. So we've got these wonderful 6 tips and insights. So what we always say to people is don't let the data overwhelm you. And I think it's really easy to go in and just, I don't know where to begin. So actually, you know, what are you going after? Take what you want to go after and make sure you go after that. I think it's really easy to go, definitely get stuck into like a rabbit hole, and then you're spending a lot of time looking at information that you weren't necessarily wanting to go after in the first place. So just find it interesting. Don't let it overwhelm you. Going back to what we said, try to create a call to action on every page. We're talking about those downloadable documents. So what do you want people to achieve from the content? And it's really important with those call to actions to be clear and get that right at the top, because if you're writing things for the web, we know that people tend to skim read and sometimes they don't even make it to the bottom of that page. So definitely be clear. And if you need to, create that summary, a really, really short summary of what your communication's about and what you want them to achieve. So if it's a health and safety message, if it's to watch a video, if it's to complete a form, you know, make sure that information is at the top. Okay. From our benchmarking report, so we're going to give you a link to sign up to, that we know from our research that colleagues have approximately 10 minutes a day to read internal comms. So you know, this is where you need to prioritize, use your audiences, use that empathy mapping, use the IC conversion framework to just get the most out of your communications, because 10 minutes isn't a lot of time in their day-to-day work. And I think it's, I said before, so it's easier than ever to communicate, but it's so hard for your colleagues to keep up. So that 10 minutes is just key. That's all you've got, okay? Next one, so look out for hot zones, so you can use tools like Swoop Analytics to find out when your peak times are, so when you've got more eyeballs on your channel, so whether that's Viva Engage, your intranet, post. So you're better to probably post at 8 AM on a Monday than 4 PM on a Friday. So to get the most out of your communications, use those hot spots and those hot zones. And there's something else I want to share. I've always told people to keep your copy short, about 250 to 300 words, but actually from our early research, we're finding that 500 words on a web page is our sweet spot, and that is keeping people on that page. So another takeaway for you to think about. So people have got 10 minutes, 500 words is a good indicator of keeping people sort of reading and engaged with your content. So I can see some 10 minutes is shocking. Yeah, no, 10 minutes. Yeah, 10 minutes. And that's, yeah, it's not a lot of time, is it?
It seems like everyone has a day job that they need to do.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? It is. And I think also with pandemic, I think probably teams are probably smaller than what they were, but the amount of work hasn't reduced.
Yeah.
So headcount, yeah.
I agree with what you said too, Gemma, about it's really easy to create content. And that's one of the things that's happening with like generative AI and things like that. It's going to, like, the cost for creating a word is going to be much, much cheaper, which means that we're going to have a lot more words out there. But that doesn't mean that people are going to have more time to read them. To keep that in mind. And if I was to add one more tip to this slide, especially being that it is difficult to gather quantitative metrics on a lot of the things, I wouldn't downplay qualitative metrics. And in that is like, I would highly recommend you go out there and make it a practice to talk to people and just gather stories and just like understand what their day in the life is and things like that. When, you know, we first talked about empathy mapping and user experience design, one of the things we realized from that practice is People don't, I don't want to say this, people, it's not that they don't tell the truth in surveys. It's just that when they're collecting back to the past, it's not always what they remember is not always what actually happened. So observation, conversations, being able to like dig into certain topics is going to be key. So I'd highly recommend you all like take some kind of time or segment of time on a regular basis to find and chat with like employees just to see how are they taking this communications. And I guarantee you that interesting and new ideas will come out from that as well.
Absolutely. So yeah, active listening. And actually going back to your survey point as well, is sometimes the people you want to complete the surveys aren't the people that are completing the surveys as well. So you don't get that holistic overview of how people are feeling. I can see someone's just put their hand up. Come off mute.
Yes. Hi, thank you. So that last sticky, the early research showing that 500 words is the sweet spot. Is it implied that more words require more attention?
Yeah, I think it is. Well, I think also people just don't read. So we know that this is just from the early benchmarking report, the 500 words is that seems to keep people on the page. I think also though, Carrie, end on the topic. So this is from my previous experience as a intranet manager, is that we always knew that like people communication, so anything to do with people, colleagues, employees, you know, they could be a little bit long, you know, long form, and they would keep people on the page. But I think if you're trying to get a call to action, if you've got to give them a key bit of information, so training, you need them to, you know, focus on this, you need to watch this video, 500 words, but keep it at that, because we know, as I said, 10 minutes, 500,
Right.
Keep it short, sweet, straight to the point. And I think that's it. I think it's really hard to, it's just, and I'm going to say, it's cutting the waffle, isn't it? It's just give people what they need. And then.
And I don't remember like statistics about pace, but I think what you're saying then too is 500 usually can be digested and understood within 10 minutes. Okay,
yeah, I think it's,
thank you.
I think the average, I want to say, okay, the average, and I might be completely wrong here, but the average reader, do they read something like 100 words in a couple of minutes? I think it's that. And so these are good. Actually, someone's gave us some feedback on that. Said they're good. 500 words are good filling articles. So if you've got time between meetings, if you've got, you know, if you're on lunch quickly, or you're waiting for, like I'm in the UK, so I wait for a kettle for a cup of tea to boil. So you've got those short spurts to just digest that copy, that content, you know, 500 words quick, I can understand it, it goes in, and I've taken what I need from it.
LinkedIn says the general adult population can read 150 to 250 words per minute.
There we go. Perfect. Okay, so quickly, Coco, did you want to pick up this slide?
Yeah, so if some of you are wondering where you can get more information, Swoop has a treasure trove of reports, case studies, blog posts, videos, and so forth on our website that you can go in. It's free. You don't have to be a Swoop customer to have access to all these wonderful reports. And then we do have a new benchmarking reports coming through on how to run a successful intranet. We have early insights coming here. I think on October 4th, we've got something that we just want to show you and give you a taste of it. If you want to pre-register, there's a QR code. We've also put it in the chat. And Gemma?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Pinaki. It's been brilliant. And like, please connect with us on LinkedIn if you've got any more questions. I can see this. So Dave's asked a quick question. Does anyone on the call integrate Axios style into their articles communication? So it'd just be good for everyone on the call to network, keep in touch. I think it's just learning from peers, understanding how others work within this environment. But like, honestly, we are, hopefully you've got from a super informal approach us with any questions you might have. And we can also put you probably in touch with other people. If we don't know the answer, we can absolutely help you and put you in
Fine.
touch with others.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Be well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Pinaki. Thank you, Brielle.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone, for joining.